Episode 4 of No Huddle Podcast. If you are a devoted viewer and have watched episodes 1 through 3 and are now watching today, you will realize that we are wearing the same thing. It is not because we just wear the same thing. It is because we have recorded now 4 episodes tonight. We wanted to cover a variety of ground. Today's episode is going to be about daily fantasy sports. There's going to be some of you who have tuned in from a baseball perspective, from a season-long perspective, who know nothing about daily fantasy sports. I'm going to give you a really quick high level on daily fantasy sports. It's something really important to me. I started by playing season-long football. I got a promotion to try out at the time FanDuel, something like $10 to deposit on FanDuel and try daily fantasy sports. I ended up winning the tournament, and the rest is history, where I ended up playing now daily fantasy sports every day, depending on the sport, for the last multiple years. It is a game of skill. It is a game of statistics. It is a game of strategy, and it is a game of a lot of fun. Justin, I want to toss it to you. DFS is, I know, something that you and I have bonded over. Can you tell me about DFS and how you got introduced to the game and what your normal play of DFS looks like?
Yeah. First off, let's start off by saying today was my last start. I'm done for the season. You and I are going to be able to chop up NFL slates how we want to,
Yes,
in
sir.
the fashion that we want to going forward. And I'm just really excited going forward looking at it. How I got into DFS started with fantasy football with my buddies and whatnot. And one of my friends from back home, he had a DFS league of guys that were just from our hometown where you made a lineup every week and you competed. You kind of just did what you wanted. You made the lineup how you wanted, and you were just competing with guys from back home. I started doing that, and I was having success pretty quickly. And it just opened up a whole different spectrum of looking at fantasy for me. I immediately started noticing it helped me with my everyday season long fantasy, doing those lineups, just looking at the matchups and everything on the DraftKings app and everything. And then I was doing good in those contests, and then I kind of started broadening things, going to the actual public contests, competing in those contests, had a little bit of success, kind of was figuring out the ropes, figuring out what like chalk meant and all those different terms and everything. And it's kind of how I came about meeting you. Noticed that you were taking down big contests and everything, and I was just ended up messaging you and whatnot. And now we've built an awesome friendship and everything. But I mean, DFS for me is, it's honestly my favorite thing about football now. It's the week to week basis. It's the matchups every single week. It's the who's going to boom, who's going to bust. It's the volatility in it. It's everything, that all the above. It's like you said, it's the skill, it's the strategy, it's the little bit of luck that you also need. That's what makes it. That's kind of the rolling the dice with it as well. And it's what's fun about it is that with the proper research and the proper strategies and the kind of stuff that you and I do, texting back and forth, giving each other inputs and whatnot, you can put yourself in a good position to narrow down the luck and get it to where you only need a few things to go right, and you can put yourself in a great position.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much to it, and I used to play poker back in the day. There's this element that you can put yourself in this great position and still not win, which is a little crazy, or you can put yourself in this great position and absolutely win. Not only double your money, which is typical of bets, not only triple your money, quadruple, but you can win things like 100 times your money in a DFS lineup. You can win 1,000 times your money. And it's just crazy when you think about that there are some people every week who might put in $20 in a DFS lineup and win $1 million. And I want to call that out really quick because there are a lot of people who will jump in to daily fantasy sports. They'll look at DraftKings and they'll see, hey, $20 to win $1 million. There's going to be something like hundreds of thousands of entrants in that contest. No offense, you might know the most football out of anyone in the world. You are probably not going to win that contest. So I just want you to have realistic expectations as to what you are playing, as to what your lineup looks like, and as to how much you might actually win, because it goes a long way. I have been very blessed to win a lot of money playing daily fantasy sports. I have not won $1 million. I have often not played for $1 million because I know what my odds look like to actually win. And so I actually purposely steer away from those kind of tournaments because I know it is unlikely to win. So, Justin, I know you and I have talked about daily fantasy sports. I think something that's really cool, if you don't mind sharing, is that on a week to week basis, you and the Cubs actually might play a daily fantasy sports contest, depending on, if it's a big slate, if it's Super Bowl, if it's something like that. Do you mind talking about that for a second?
Yeah, we've developed our own little Cubs league on DraftKings where we do NFL DFS, also like NBA finals. We do a little bit of golf here and there, but NFL season's when it's really ticking up. But we do a weekly contest. We do the showdowns for the Monday night, Thursday night, and Sunday night games, and we obviously do the Sunday main slate. It's grown obviously over the years. Like I think I started it in 2020. And I was probably getting 5 to 7 entries, guys I knew that just like obviously was playing and stuff. And now, I mean, we're around like 15 entries every Sunday now, and it's just cool because like guys that are in the baseball community, like they're obviously very invested in the fantasy football community as well, and everyone thinks they know. Like that's the fun part, and it's like you kind of get to test like what you actually know on the weekly basis against one another. And there's a lot of chit chat in the locker room about it and stuff. It's just it's a lot of fun. It's fun walking in. Like obviously I'm diving deep every single week. I know the chalk, I know the contrarian plays and stuff, and people are showing me their lineups and whatnot. It's just fun. Like telling a guy like, oh, you're gonna be choking on a little bit of chalk. You got a lot of chalky guys in there. I know a lot of guys are playing him, or the guy that won it this past week had Juwan Jennings. The guy that took down our contest had Juwan Jennings, and he won it by a mile. It was just like I asked him, I was like, how'd you end up on Juwan Jennings? He was like, I was on my flex spot and I only had so much salary, and he was the top guy left. And that's just like so hilarious how it happens. It's just like Juwan Jennings won somebody $1 million this past week, and this guy had our contest.
You mentioned it earlier, like there's a lot of luck involved, and you might just land on that luck by your last flex play, or you might just get luck that he might score, that the player that you selected might score a fluky touchdown or whatnot. There's a great book. You and I met about a year ago. You got married a little under a year ago, I believe. I bought you this book called Dueling with Kings by Daniel Barbarisi. And I get DM'd on Twitter from a lot of people of, hey, I see that you won on DraftKings. Any recommendations on how to play daily fantasy sports? I always recommend this book, Dueling with Kings by Daniel Barbarisi. One of my favorite books. It's not going to give you any secret codes. It's not going to give you any like hidden tricks. There's no secret codes to daily fantasy sports. You just need to think about the strategy. But I actually messaged Daniel Barbarisi and I mentioned that you and I were going to be starting a podcast. He's going to be joining one of our future episodes talking about daily fantasy sports. He is an amazing strategist thinking about daily fantasy sports, where he came in from an analytical perspective and an interviewer perspective and said, look, I know nothing about this game, but I'm going to analyze this game and figure out what the hell is going on. And he actually won the world championships in daily fantasy sports hockey, a sport that he knew nothing about, and he won the championship. So he's going to be in one of our future episodes. I'm really excited for that. Thank you to Daniel for being willing to join. But with that being said, I want to talk about week 4 DFS. There is a lot to talk about. One of the first elements that I like to talk about for somebody who doesn't know daily fantasy sports at all, and I thank you for sticking to this point thus far, you get a salary, a quote unquote salary that you have to spend on your players. The top quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes are priced very highly. The lower end quarterbacks not to pick on them, but maybe like a Daniel Jones or a Will Levis or something like that are priced a little bit cheaper. Same with running backs, same with receivers, tight ends, defenses. And so you have to mix and match between high end players, high price players that you know or that you think will do well versus that low end player, right? And so it's a lot of analytics in terms of, hey, I think this player is going to do well, but he is priced too cheaply. And so I'm going to pick him in my lineup and I'm going to enter. The beauty of DFS is that you can enter against one player. Justin and I could do a 1-to-1 heads up in terms of, $10, $5, whatever it might be. Or we might be able to enter, to my point earlier, a $20 entry against hundreds of thousands of people where we might be able to win $1 million or something like that, right? It is my personal goal to one day win $1 million. I've been blessed to win 100,000, 150,000, 200,000. I've never won 200,000. I've never won $1 million. My goal is to win $1 million. And hopefully maybe on this podcast, we can build a lineup that will win $1 million.
We will. We definitely will.
I appreciate that.
By the way, I just want to add, and I believe in our history of head-to-heads, I might have the better record.
You do. You do. That's the other element that's crazy about daily fantasy sports. I look at my lineups as, hey, how do I get lucky? And you mentioned the chalk earlier. The chalk last week, we're talking week 4. The chalk last week was Jordan Mason, who was at 6,200, which represents maybe about 12% of your total salary. I'm doing the math off the top of my head, so bear with me if I'm off a couple percent. But Jordan Mason represents a good amount of your salary. And I texted you actually, I think on Saturday night, and I said, I am fading, which in DFS means I am not playing Jordan Mason, because if he does not score a touchdown, he might not be in the optimal lineups. And he is projected to be in 60% of optimal lineups. He is somebody who I'm not going to play. He did not end up scoring a touchdown. He was not in the optimal lineups. And that was something that actually led to a good week. So I'm curious, Justin, how do you analyze chalk? You mentioned chalk is something important in your conversations. How do you analyze chalk, and how important is it for you to avoid chalk in your contest and or play chalk? I imagine it's a little careful balance of it all.
Yeah, it is a careful balance, and it's solely dependent on the contest you're playing in. If I'm playing in my Cubs league or a 20-person contest where I'm against 19 other random people, or I would say like 150 to 200 and less, chalk's not bad because everyone's going to be playing it just because it makes sense. Like Jordan Mason made sense this past week, especially with the role he's in that offense. You're projecting him to have a Christian McCaffrey role at $6,200, whereas Christian McCaffrey is normally priced around $9,000. So you're getting what you would call a $3,000 discount possibly. And like I said, if like you said, if he scores a touchdown, he's now at 16, 17 fantasy points rather than 10. He's now in possibly the $1 million lineup, but you have those outliers where like Saquon ends up going for 38 fantasy points and now he's optimal. But that's kind of the beauty of the game where you're playing in those bigger contests, like the $1 million maker and whatnot. It's you have to be weird in some ways. Like there's just kind of like Jawan Jennings. Like he goes off for 40 something fantasy points and he was 30 something $100, and it's like you had to have him. If you didn't have him, you're not competing for first place. Like that's just how it works, and that's why DFS is my favorite. Like that's why I love it so much, and that's why and how it can help you in season-long fantasy. Just how it's helped me in my fantasy endeavors. I mean, I've not to toot my own horn, I've been only doing fantasy since 2019. I think 2020 is when I really got into it. I've won like 5 fantasy championships. I've done all right in DFS. I mean, you've seen my ups and downs in DFS. Yep. I'm all over the place. Betting wise, I do really well as far as placing straight bets. Taking guys for huge parlays and whatnot. I've done very well and whatnot. So I'm just really excited for this podcast. It's going to be fun breaking all this down, sharing our thoughts, sharing our processes, sharing our bets, and having some people to follow along. And like kind of like we've said earlier, even if it's not, we have on record what we're doing, and we can go back on our processes and see everything.
Yeah, I kind of view this this podcast, and we've talked about labeling every single episode in terms of what we're talking about. I kind of view this as the season-long conversations is going to be the friendly version, if you will, and the DFS betting props conversations and episodes are going to be like the money conversations, right? Like, hey, we are risking our real dollars here to win. And to your point, we can't tell you what to do. We're not going to tell you what to do. We are only going to tell you what we're doing. Sometimes we are going to lose. Sometimes we're going to win. You know, it's nothing to blame us about. If you win or lose, we are simply telling you the viewers, what we are doing, right? And so I think it's fun and more enjoyable maybe than other DFS or betting podcasts where they are telling you to bet something specific. We're just telling you what we're going to do, and maybe we win, maybe we don't.
Totally agree.
Love that. So let's talk about maybe the way that I start an analysis of every single week. And I talked about this in a previous episode. I will talk about analyze what the over-unders are of every single week. And so week 4 specifically, there are 3 games with the highest over-unders. It is number 1, the Commanders at the Cardinals with a over-under of 50. Cardinals are projected to win by 3.5 points. The Bengals at Panthers at a over-under of 48. Bengals by minus 4.5 on the road in Carolina is interesting. And then it's the Jags, who we saw absolutely demolished against the Bengals last week. The Jags at Houston Texans with an over-under of 45.5. Texans minus 6.5. I have a couple thoughts. Justin, I'm going to pause there. Anything that sticks out to you?
No, all I will say is I'm looking at everything projections and wise through Sabre. It doesn't have every game updated like what you're looking at. It doesn't have the Bengals and Panthers. It doesn't have Houston Jags. It doesn't have Tampa Eagles. It has every other game. It doesn't have Chiefs Chargers, Washington Arizona. But I can give my thoughts on those games without projections. Would you like to move about this like game per game, like that, just like kind of down the row?
Yeah, let's absolutely do that. Yeah, and that's a good point, right? We are recording this on Tuesday night, September 24th. There is a lot that's going to change throughout the week. There is a lot of elements of people who are going to go out in. There's a lot of coach speak. Who knows what's going to change throughout the week from an injury perspective? God forbid people getting injured throughout the week. We're doing the best that we can from an early perspective. And so keep that in the back of your mind. With that being said, let's go game by game. I have Sabre Sim pulled up right now too. I want to give a shout out to Sabre Sim. They are lineup. They are the best lineup builder from a DFS perspective that I see out there. Sabre Sim provides amazing value from an analytics perspective of a DFS view of simulations of what happens on a week-to-week basis. Justin and I both use Sabre Sim on a week-to-week basis. I want to start with the Rams against the Bears with an over-under that looks pretty low. I think an easy way to handle DFS is by targeting and by playing players that are in the higher scoring games. The Rams at Bears has an over-under of 41. The Bears are projected to win by 3 points. It is actually one of my favorite games of the week. I actually think that it's going to be not owned at all. Caleb Williams is at 5,600. He is the second highest ADOT at 9.6 yards. The Rams defense has the second highest ADOT at 9.6 yards. They allow a 72% catchable ball rate. They allow 259 yards per game and the second highest QB rating of 127.5. The Bears are in a smash spot. Caleb Williams at 5,600 is a go-to target for me. I know that's a little random, but the Bears paired with Odunze and DJ Moore, I think is an absolutely smash spot and one that I actually, from a DFS perspective, get giddy at looking at. Justin, I'm curious, is that absolutely crazy?
You're spot on, and this is why exactly what you and I are looking at right now is why I like looking at things at an early perspective. So it's immediately when I look at this, I see Saber has the Bears projected for 22.1 points and the Rams projected for 20.8 points. That's 43 point total. So like I just start doing some math. I pull up FanDuel. The over under is 40.5. So you can obviously do some math. They're projecting for more points than 40.5. Bears minus 2.5, minus 120. That's they're projected to win by 2 points. You can take that however you want. But I totally agree with what you're saying and everything with the Rams defense and how they're giving it up through the air, especially with everything you're saying about ADOT and whatnot, especially with the week that Odunze just had.
Yeah.
You just saw Caleb Williams throw the ball a ton. I mean, I totally agree. I could see a Caleb Williams, Odunze, DJ Moore stack absolutely blowing the charts off this week.
Yeah. If
And
you are
especially if it's low owned, it's just going to make too much sense to play it. And I don't know. We'll go ahead. Can I go ahead and share my screen just to kind of show my process a little bit
Let's do it.
as far as going game by game and eliminating players and whatnot?
Dude, I love that. Hey, we talked about as you go ahead and share your screen, we talked about in earlier episodes, we're calling this the No Huddle podcast because we're literally just rolling. We have no plans, right? We have a general topic in mind, and our general topic in mind right now is DFS. We are on a Tuesday to Wednesday night. This is very early in our DFS process, and so I love that Justin is willing to just go ahead and share his screen and talk through it. So Justin, go ahead.
Are you good to see everything? You can see everything? Okay, cool. So kind of to what we were saying, we're kind of eliminating and adding players to our player pool as we go game to game here.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Rams Bears is our first game. I was talking about the projected points and everything. I got the filter on. I just want to shout out Saber. This website's just how it's set up is beautifully. It's easy to digest. It's easy to understand. It didn't take me long to get this. It goes game by game. You can filter each game. You can go by team stacks. You can go by games. They have someone better on their website that probably breaks it down and everything. But just shout out Saber for just having a very easy product to digest. It was very easy for me to pick up and whatnot. But going back to this game, Kyron Williams is going to be somebody you would want to have on this bring back spot if this game ends up just blowing the doors off the total and it turns into a shootout. Kyron Williams is somebody that can find the end zone. You definitely want him in your player pool as a bring back. What I like to do is just go ahead and eliminate everybody and just start adding them single-handedly. So I'll go him. I'll go Caleb Williams, obviously, 17.6. We'll boost him up just because we obviously like to play a little bit more than most. Stafford is somebody you could also put in the pool just in case he does end up outscoring Caleb somehow. I'm not going to add him right now, just kind of going through the process at this point. DJ Moore is somebody you definitely want to stack with Caleb Williams. Demarcus Robbins is a beautiful bring back, still not priced too highly. I'm out on DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to be playing DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to play Tutu at this point. Rome Dunze, I think, is a great play. I'm going to boost him up to 12, especially coming off the week he just had. I thought Cole Kmet got a decent target share. I'm going to put him at 8 and just play him as well. I see, so like right here, I see that he's projected ownership of 5. I want to make sure I'm at least even with the field at this point. So I'm going to automatically boost him to 5 just because like that's somebody at 5%. If he catches 2 touchdowns and no other tight end on the slate does anything, especially in this spot, like it could be make or break. and he ends up, instead of 8, he gets 16 to 20. You know what I'm saying? And then Bears D, I mean, at this point, I mean, obviously we'll keep all the defenses probably clicked up until Saturday. Not necessarily I'm gonna click them right now. Jordan Whittington, decently priced, not gonna be owned, could be a bring back, as well as Tyler Johnson, priced right under him. We'll put them in there. We'll put them both at 8, just because Cooper and Puka are out. I think one of them definitely surpasses 8. The other probably doesn't. Colby Parkinson, still another cheap tight end. It's like kind of like what I was just saying, with those guys going to be out. Like he's gonna get some targets down the stretch. Somebody I will play is Roshan Johnson. We were speaking in earlier episodes. Yeah. I think he does end up getting more and more involved in that offense. I'm not going to put 8. I'm going to put 7.8. I mean, it's very finicky. It's very whatever, but that's just how my brain's working right now. As I'm scrolling, I don't think there's anybody else, but yeah, I mean, just to kind of show the process and how I go about each and every single game. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I think DFS is interesting. It's a blend of art and science, right? You have the science that is the projections, what is the simulations giving me, and then it's an art, to Justin's point, of who do I think is going to do well. I know football, I know analytics. Who do I think is going to do well? And to the point earlier, the Bears are in a great position. The Rams are not good against the pass, and there are elements outside that we can actually target. Justin, you brought up Cole Kmet earlier.
Wow, I'm just looking this up right now. I didn't pull this up on. I like to look at things on my phone as well, on the DraftKings app. Cole Kmet, it's looking the 29th. The Rams are ranked 29th right now against the tight end. That's kind of what we're talking about as far as like capitalizing on a position. I think his ownership probably ends up closer towards 10%. Just looking at that, just people playing on their phone and clicking him because he's cheap. But there's something to pay attention to. If he doesn't end up closing closer towards 10%, maybe you should climb towards 15 and 20%. That's kind of where you kind of get the edge.
Yeah, you nailed it. If there is a position and if there's a player that you believe in that is going to do well, there is every reason to enter them significantly above their projected ownership. If their projected ownership is to be 10%, hey, why not include them out of 2, 3, 4 out of 10 of your lineups? Because you will be in a significantly better place if they ended up being the right person, right? And the Rams passing defense is absolutely awful on the season. I think Caleb is in a great position. I think DJ Moore is in a great position. And I think Rome Odunze is in a great position. And you might be thinking in the back of your mind, hey, Keenan Allen is probably going to be back this week. Well, guess what? The Rams have allowed the second highest ADOT on total to all receivers, but the second lowest target rate to the slot receiver. Keenan Allen plays 60+% of his snaps in the slot. This is not his matchup. The slot is actually the Rams' best position. And so Keenan Allen does not actually match up well. Rowe matches up well. And DJ Moore matches up well. Cole Kmet can still match up well, but Keenan Allen does not. And so I actually love DJ Moore and Rome Odunze as two of my favorite targets from a DFS perspective.
Do you like the projection of 15.5 for DJ Moore?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'd even go up to 16.5. I think that's totally fair.
Cool.
Yeah. And I love the Rome play. So Rome Odunze last week was at 4,200, if I'm not mistaken. And this week he's at 5,200. I'll double check it.
He could have absolutely broke the slate too. He missed him once.
Oh, dude. So Rome Odunze last week was owned 5% of lineups in an average tournament. I had 40%. And if he would have scored 2 touchdowns, he scored over 100 yards and a touchdown. Great play on the slate. Not a must-have, but a borderline must-have.
One more touchdown, he's must have.
One more touchdown, he's must-have. If you don't have him in any lineup, you are not winning a you are not winning a tournament. At 40% last week,
Yeah.
would have been amazing. You talked about Roshan.
Maybe this is the week for him.
Dude, I absolutely agree. His projected ownership right now is 3.6%, according to SaberSim. I would guess based off of last week, he ends up creeping up to 5 to 10%. Even though he's a little bit more expensive, I think people will see that production last week. If he ends up landing at that 3 to 4%, I will have 50% plus again. No doubt about it.
Love that out of you.
Good. So the other game that I want to target on, our goal is to keep these episodes within 30 minutes. This is probably going to be our longer episodes as we go down game by game, slate by slate. The other game that I want to talk about is the Jags at the Texans. The Texans are the total for the game is 45.5. The Texans are projected to win by 6.5. I don't believe this game is updated within Saber. So I just want to call out a couple things. The Bills absolutely demolished the Jaguars last night. We were recording on Tuesday night, and they absolutely demolished the Jaguars via the pass. And so I believe we saw last week Texans at Minnesota. Minnesota has a fantastic defense. They play really, really complex defensive schemes, and it threw CJ Stroud for a loop. I believe that CJ Stroud will absolutely demolish the Jags defense this week. I believe that Nico Collins, who is by 50 yards the league leading receiver in the league in the NFL by 50 yards right now, I believe that this time next week he will be the league leading receiver of the NFL by 100 yards because Nico Collins will actually absolutely go bonkers. I do not believe that this is a Stephon Diggs week, and I'll touch on that in a moment. I believe if you are playing two Texans receivers, it is Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I believe Stephon Diggs actually might deserve a place on your bench in season long. And in DFS, he's absolutely a fade. But in DFS, it is CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell for potentially all the money. Thoughts?
I love that. I'm right there with you. Like you said, it's not updated on Saber right at the moment, but I've already got those players queued. I'm right there with you. If the Jags are giving it up, it's going to be through the air. It's not through the ground. And even with the Houston Texans offense, like you want the quarterback and the targets through the air. Totally agree with you on the Tank Dell and Nico Collins and not Stephon Diggs take as well. Just the kind of way that Stephon Diggs has kind of gone about his scoring early in the year is not very sustainable. I think you and I have talked about it with Neil and Debro. If you had Stephon Diggs through those first few weeks, it was a great opportunity to trade him possibly get a good haul back. But yeah, as far as DFS goes, I totally agree with you. CJ Stroud stacks on these Jags defense.
Love that. I want to talk about one more game. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Indianapolis Colts. What's funny is that it is not a high total game. We are only talking about 41, 42-ish points on the over-under. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, to my point earlier, is a really good defense. But the Colts through the air are not a good defense. They rank in the top worst 10 of every single advanced metric that you can think of. I actually think a very, very sneaky play from a DFS perspective is Justin Fields with George Pickens. Pickens is not going to be low owned at all. The early projections are through the roof, and Justin Fields is even at 25%. I would imagine that goes down throughout the weeks. To my point earlier, there are really good spots later on in different games as people continue to analyze individual slates. But I'm curious, Justin Fields has not done well in week 1 and 2. In week 3, he rushed in a touchdown, I believe, and actually looked pretty good from a fantasy perspective. Are you open to playing Fields from a DFS perspective against the Colts that are awful against the pass, or do you think you avoid them?
No, you definitely play him, and it's because of the rushing upside with Justin Fields. He could very easily run the ball in 3 times, and then he's must have at that point. And the same thing could be said about George Pickens going up against the Indy pass defense. He could catch 2 touchdowns and have 6 catches for 100 yards. So I'm right there with you playing both of them. I also agree. I don't think these ownerships and projections are quite right. I see Justin Fields probably around the projection of 19.5, 18.5. George Pickens probably around the same. As well, with their projections going down, I think their ownerships go down as well. I don't see Fields and Pickens catching, around 70 combined percent ownership. I think Justin Fields probably floats down closer towards 15, and then Pickens will probably, tinker down towards probably like 20 to 25. I could see that getting cut in half.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the elements that I think is really interesting, we'll talk DFS, we'll talk props, we'll talk bets and parlays and whatnot. One of the elements that I think is really interesting is the receiving props for the Houston Texans. We talked about the value that the Texans bring earlier from a DFS perspective. Nico Collins' receiving lines right now is 72.5 yards. I think that is a smash spot. And there's a little juice on the over. And so maybe by the time you hear this, we're talking 73, 73.5. I absolutely agree. I mentioned this earlier. Look, we can't tell you what to bet. We won't tell you what to bet. We can only tell you what we will bet. Justin, is Nico Collins over 73 yards, let's say, a good bet?
Yes, that sounds like a great bet. That's a position where I think about taking someone's ladder, where you go, you take him over under for his line that's even money, minus 110, whatever the case may be, and you take it all the way up to like 150 yards. And you just hope the odds climb significantly. And you can literally go down the order, like whatever your 1 unit is, place that on the even money line bet to win your unit back, and then go down to like 0.75 unit for the next one, 0.5 for the next one, 0.25, and so on and so forth. Just space it out to where, you're going to win a substantial amount of money if it does end up booming.
Yeah. Nico Collins on the year, week 1, 117 yards, week 2, 135 yards, week 3, 86 yards. The Jags are the 4th worst in yards allowed and allow the 5th best QB rating. I don't see a world where the Texans and Nico Collins doesn't surpass 72.5 yards, 73 yards. I think this is a smash spot. I will call out that I'm touting the over here. I think the over is a great play. I will call out that the natural human mind psychology is to take overs. And I think there's always typically a value to taking unders because people see players that they like, see situations and matchups that they like, and bet the overs, and the unders are almost never bet. I will see a ton of parlays and prop parlays from buddies who have 3, 4, 5 parlays, receiving lines, rushing lines, players only in the overs, always overs, and there are never any unders. And so I think that's something to be in mind while you personally take bets, that unders are valuable. With that being said, I think Nico Collins over is a smash spot.
It's also just something funny to add that you don't really see many books offering to not score touchdown bets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when I always find it funny when people are taking the touchdown bets and they're taking the guys that are minus 130, plus 130, right around even money. It's like, if you just math, it's like, is this guy actually scoring a touchdown a game to where it should be even money? No. Yeah. That's why, like, if you do take those bets, you're better off taking the longer shots where, like, he might score 5 touchdowns a game, but this matchup lines up for like say a tight end or a second or third receiver. Like those are the spots I kind of try to take advantage of those bets.
Yeah, love that. Love that. The other interesting spot that I saw in my research, and another reason why I love the Texans over, is that the Texans passing defense on paper looks good because they haven't played a great amount of passing offenses, but in reality, they are actually one of the worst passing defenses in the league. They allow the highest ADOT in the league at 9.7 yards. They also, this was coming into the last week, but they allow the highest number of receiver separation coming into last week. And so I actually think the Jaguars are a really good spot to take overs on. Trevor Lawrence looks absolutely awful. Brian Thomas looks really good in that spot. And Christian Kirk looked really good in that spot last week. Am I crazy to take the Jags, or are you okay with that?
No, what the one question I beg to ask is who is Stingley going to be on? He's one of those corners that can change a game, especially if he's guarding one specific receiver the entire time. I would, if we could find out or at some point throughout the week, if he's going to be on Thomas or if he's going to be on Kirk or Davis. If he's not on Thomas Jr., yes, totally smash him.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of my favorite elements is fantasy points. I shouted them out in previous episodes. Derek Stingley right now is looked upon to be on Brian Thomas the most, but it's not a huge amount. It looks like Brian Thomas might be able to move around the formation a little bit. It looks like Stingley will not be shadowing anyone in particular. And so my hope is that Thomas and Kirk might be able to mix and match away from Stingley. I would imagine that Gabe Davis either misses or comes into the game questionable. And so I think there's this world where Brian Thomas and Christian Kirk are able to actually avoid Stingley.
Got it.
Love it, Justin. So I think our goal with DFS and bets episodes is to simply talk about what we're taking. We are both profitable DFS players, profitable bettors from a prop perspective, from a line perspective. Again, we can only talk about what we will pick. This is Tuesday night. As the weeks move on, I think we'll probably record this on Friday and Saturday, where we will be able to call out exactly what we are able to place from a bet perspective, what our quote unquote recommendations are, what we're doing. I'm curious, any final thoughts on all that?
No, I'm excited for, episodes later this week as far as breaking down this slate further, our bets as far as the season goes, just everything that we have coming forward, especially the guest you surprised me with. I'm excited about that as well. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited in general.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. If you're listening, hey, if you are a DFS expert, if you came to this podcast for hard takes, DFS takes, I get DMs constantly about, hey, what's my player pool look like this week? Who are my player pool? Who are my player takes and whatnot? I promise you, those will be coming every single week. We wanted to do a little intro into DFS for folks who maybe not too familiar with it. So bear with us. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.